Thank you for that insightful discussion, Regina Lay and Gabi Dizon. There is one story currently dominating the crypto press, and that is Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX. From zero to $16 billion hero and back to zero in a little under 5 years. So that we can address the biggest crypto issue in this year, possibly ever, we have decided to hijack the planned session of the Filipino foray into crypto. Rather, we are going to have the same panel of crypto PHOGs join us to discuss what the FTX collapse means in context of Web3 for Filipinos. We have Michael Mislos, Editor-in-Chief of BitPinas, the publication of record for the Philippine blockchain industry since 2017, leading today's discussion. Joining Mike are Beryl Lee, co-founder of YGG and early member of Coins.ph. Ramon Tayag, co-founder and CTO of BloomX. And Colin Goltra, global COO of YGG, renowned NFT collector and early team at Coins.ph.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having us. And I would like to start with this panel for asking everyone for a brief introduction and what have you been doing in crypto? Let's start with Colin.
Sure. Hey, good to see everyone again. I was up a moment ago. I learned my lesson this time and brought a giant glass of water here. I'm Colin. I'm currently the global COO at YGG. Longtime kind of crypto PH supporter. Just talked about it a moment ago. But yeah, prior to this was at Coins.ph and Binance. Just kind of focused on expanding crypto in the country here and in the region generally.
Yeah. So CTO of Bloom, you mentioned us a while ago.
I tried to give you a shout out. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get into those stories, those backpacks full of cash stories later. We are a mostly like B2B company, and we use things like Bitcoin in the background to make it more efficient.
And Barry.
Hi everyone, I'm Beryl Lee. I'm co-founder at Yield Guild Games. I mostly look after finance. I have a multidisciplinary role, but finance, legal. I was previously a founding team member at Coins.ph. I was at UBX, the innovation arm of Union Bank for some time, and I had a asset tokenization startup called CapChainX in 2016.
So the reason for the introduction is to drive home the point that you guys have been here for quite some time and therefore well equipped to discuss this particular topic that has been dominating the news in the last 2 weeks or so. So the fall of FTX and SBF. So Colin, can you give us a brief rundown on what actually happened?
So I think details are short answer no. I can sort of speak a little bit to the details that are known, and hopefully the team here can help fill in details. My understanding is I think a lot of this is downstream of the prior crises we've seen in this bear cycle, right? So earlier in the year we had Luna collapse, and then a few months after that we saw the various crypto lenders collapse. And so I think right now the theory is okay, maybe I'm going too much into mechanisms here. I guess the TLDR is FTX has gone under. There's a giant hole in the balance sheet because they took loans out against their FTT token, and then their FTT token tanked precipitously, and basically they got called, and there's a hole in the balance sheet. And then now apparently, I think there's a hack where there's missing funds. There's apparently some sort of backdoor in the system, and so the funds have been drained. That's like the TLDR. There's speculative mechanisms on what happened, and there's several players involved. But the facts of the case right now is that FTX has basically halted withdrawals and appears to be going under.
Yeah, and connecting it to the OG part, I mean, I'm not going to claim that, but that title, but this isn't my first bear market, and you see this kinds of things in bear markets, right? Like, was it Buffett that said, when the tide goes out, you know who's swimming naked. And so pretty much every bear market, someone blows up. And then that cascades.
Happy to provide more details, right? So FTX is one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. That means if anybody actually wants to buy crypto, they actually exchange it for fiat, right? So technically, you kind of like deposit your funds, your crypto, within the custody of this exchange. So while they actually have like $10 billion of deposits, they've actually, of course, because sometimes you also earn like interest, right? If you actually like stake some of your crypto, so on and so forth. So FTX actually lent the like $8 billion to a hedge fund, Alameda, to actually speculate in their hedge fund business, so that 8 billion could be like 16 billion, 20 billion, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, it was not exposed that Alameda was not doing well in their hedge fund business. Therefore, they've lost that 8 billion. So when people actually found out, it happened when CZ from Binance decided, oh, maybe I'm going to start selling some of my investment positions on this exchange. People got suspicious. Like, why are you selling your stake on FTX if you think that FTX has a lot of potential? So the community within Twitter started debunking what's going on, and they've realized that funds are kind of like missing, they're insolvent, and they're illiquid. So people started pulling out money like a bank run, like in normal banks, when the bank runs out of funds or there's actually something wrong with the economy, people start pulling out like funds from the bank. It's exactly the same that happened with FTX. People started pulling their funds out of exchanges in case that they run out of money that they can actually withdraw. So it's become endemic. A lot of other smaller crypto exchanges, businesses, and so on and so forth rely on depositing their funds within FTX, and there's a contagion going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'd say, colorful details, and there's a lot of kind of key players and characters involved. Right now, I think it's still hard to separate the facts of the case from widespread speculation about like consensus facts of the case. So it's a little bit hard to separate those two things right now. But the big one is there was some sort of collateralized loan which blew up when the FTT token tanked, and basically, they did not back their deposits one-to-one like a regulated player would have to, and because of that, it appears to be blowing up. And that's kind of what we know.
You guys surely have a lot to say about this particular topic, no? I would go to Ramon. You run an exchange at the moment, and FTX is an exchange, obviously, and I won't ask about your balance sheet, but is this something that is could fly here in the Philippines with the regulators that are on you guys?
Well, they certainly wouldn't allow it, right? But bad actors can do something like that, and they might get caught sooner or later before something blows up. But it's possible. So I guess the moral of the lesson there is don't keep majority of your funds, if you don't have to, with someone else, right? Especially in this space where it is a little bit like there's less, or there are more instances of things like FTX happening, right? Like there's some growing up that we all have to do.
Thank you, Ramon. And I remember that you guys at Bloom is actually advocating, like, even though you are an exchange, your mantra is not your keys, not your coins. So you encourage your users to actually keep their money out of Bloom, right?
Yes, that's right. And we're mostly like a B2B or business to business. So, having custody of assets really isn't our thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Ramon. And I want to ask the panel now, what do you think will be the ripple effects of this particular scenario in our industry? Let me start with Beryl.
Yeah, so with what happened within the industry, of course, panic will ensue. There's a loss of trust within, like the industry. It's actually the same thing with the financial crisis, right? We've just had the Lehman Brothers moment where, like people have actually lost trust. They don't know whom to actually rely on these days. There's a lot of like bankrupts, which is like withdrawals from various exchanges like happening now. So I think it's one of the challenges to date. But the difference between crypto and also the financial crisis is in crypto we actually have real innovation. The financial crisis was just like instruments created out of like thin air, right? Which is CDOs and like credit default obligations, and then they slice and dice like property, right? It was financial engineering, whereas in crypto, we actually have real platforms, we actually have real games actually being built right now. There's actually fundamentals behind. And so despite the contagion, people within the industry who are real builders are really positive because of the innovation right now.
I would like to ask Colin and Ramon, because FTX is sort of a regulated entity, it's a centralized exchange, there is a central entity. Do you think this is something that will drive people to move into DeFi?
I think that's the hope. Certainly, I think a lot of people are learning a very expensive lesson here. And so, I think if to the extent that a centralized exchange is a middle ground between full DeFi and not using crypto, I think there's going to be people going in both directions, right? So on the one hand, it's going to drive some factor of adoption to DeFi, but I do think there's going to be also a large faction that just sits out the next crypto cycle and probably buys the top of the next market in like 4 years. I think it will drive some DeFi adoption, but I think people will also take the opposite lesson as well.
Yeah, they're going to have to get over it first, right? Like, recoup their losses. But I certainly hope that as people do their research, they don't also think that everything available in crypto land is worth getting into, right? Like, you got to know, just like for people who put their funds in centralized institutions, what kind of risks you're taking when you use a smart contract, right? Like, what stable coin is it based on? If it's mostly relies on a stable coin and that issuer blows up, there are these scenarios that are very important to play in your head. And when I was listening to some investors in the TradFi space, one thing that struck me, something that they said, and it wasn't about FTX in particular, but just about investing and managing money. It's the ones that do well aren't necessarily the ones that they're the ones that did not blow up. They survived, right? They survived their 30-year, 40-year career in this space, and so evaluating that risk is very important to do this well.
I want to talk briefly about CZ and SBF. So obviously, two great crypto titans. We call them by their acronym, or I mean their initials, right? So do you think the tweet of CZ publicly calling out or publicly saying that they're going to divest their FT2 tokens played a huge role in what happened? More than the CoinDesk article, more than the others? Let's start with Colin, the ex-Binance.
I will not speak to motivations, but I do think it clearly sent a market signal. I think, I don't know, I don't want to speak to motivations. I don't know that it was, I think some people think it's some grand conspiracy. I don't know that that's the case. But I think it had a market impact. But also I think there's, there's some extent to which there's risk managing of a position. And so if they had understanding that they should get out of the position, they were, to some extent, they were forthright to disclose that, I guess. But yeah, motivations here I want to be very careful on, not to.
Yeah, so
It's hard to say.
The morning after this FTX debacle, someone came into the Bitcoin meetup I hold, and they were distraught because they had some funds in FTX, and he asked if CZ, if it's CZ's fault, right? And I go, well, with all these blowups, there's always some catalyst. Would you say it's that catalyst's fault? Like, they've been running their business, apparently, we all learned, a certain way that made it more vulnerable to price movements in their token, right? And that's what ultimately brought them down.
The meme that comes to mind here is the chart where it's one axis is fuck around and the others find out. And yeah, I think I've been seeing that one a lot in this scenario.
What about you, Becca?
So I'm a really big proponent of freedom of speech, right? And I personally, I don't mind like CZ calling out SBF, for example, for as long as there is evidence, right? And the evidence was strong. So I'd rather that it blew up today than it blows up like later, right? Because the consequences will be more severe if we actually find this out, like when they have like deposits of more than like $20 billion already, right? So I think that's okay. And for me, like this actually goes back to the importance of blockchain technologies, right? Because we actually need transparency. And with blockchain technology and crypto, we're actually able to provide that evidence that we need to be able to really like call out people, for instance.
Actually, to add on to Beryl's point, I talked about effects, I talked about motivations. There's the third piece that I think Beryl raises, which is the right to do it. And I agree that I think CZ was fully within his rights to speak openly on an issue. Yeah.
Thank you for your answers, and I think we are about to run out of time. And I just want to ask this final question. People are saying that this particular event is actually sets back the industry like 5 years or 10 years later. I would love to ask you guys, what does this FTX event, what does it mean for the Philippines, for Crypto PH, for our industry here locally? Maybe I'll start, Colin.
Well, certainly if FTX was going to come in, I don't think they're going to anymore. I think beyond that, though, like I think Ramon made a point about kind of natural market forces. I kind of agree that something was going to blow up around this time anyway. And I think a lot of us thought it was probably Luna and the lenders. I think this is actually, I still believe that this situation is downstream of the Luna blow up. And it's a little bit of a folk belief for people that have been in the industry for a long time. But we are weirdly on these 4-year cycles, loosely based around not loosely, but like there is high correlation with kind of the Bitcoin halving cycle and just there's blow-ups and, there's this 4-year cycle. And so I kind of think if it wasn't this, it would have been something. And there would have been, I think there would have been some sort of natural blow-up. And maybe it would have been just the blow-ups we've seen already. But I do think something was going to blow up around this time anyway. And so there's an extent to which it's like, markets are not deterministic, but like, something was going to set us back just because there is some sort of natural market cycle. It's a very cyclical business. And so maybe that was already baked in.
Yeah. So this is not the first. It's not going to be the last. So hopefully that people learn from this lesson and they evaluate the risks some more in the future.
Markets are cyclical, right? And during the bear market, it's always the best time to build. And in the Philippines, we're known as really great creatives and builders. So just keep building. If you don't have any exposure to the entire FTX debacle, just like focus and build.
There might be people here in the audience who might got affected by FTX, by the implosion of this, and even the implosion of Luna before. What do you guys can say to them?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry to see it happen. It's brutal. Reach out, talk to people. Like this too shall pass. It's I think if you stick with it over many cycles, that's how the wealth gets built. I think you kind of have to learn those lessons. You know, you have to really take those like injuries in the market once or twice before you really learn it, and then you kind of learn sort of these long-term time horizons that you know, help you get through it. Yeah.
Yeah, you fail once, expect to fail many more times. That's the only way to succeed.
Okay, so
But I'm very compassionate to that situation. I'm sorry to hear it. Yeah.
thank you so much for this panel. We have Colin, Ramon, and Beryl.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Mislos, Beryl Lee, Ramon Tayag, and Colin Goltra.